Welcome to Decision Analyst Insider Series webinar on sales forecasting for durable goods. My name is Christy Allen. I am the Marketing Director at Decision Analyst and the moderator today. Before I introduce our presenters, I have a few notes for everyone. In the handout section, there are some white papers and case studies about sales forecasting for everyone. Also, please feel free to ask questions by typing in the chat box. We will attempt to answer as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. If we don't answer your question during the webinar, someone will respond to your question within a day or two. Today's presenters are Jerry Thomas, President and CEO of Decision Analyst. Jerry has over 35 years expertise in marketing research and sales forecasting. And John Colia, Senior Vice President of Advanced Analytics. He has approximately 30 years of experience employing advanced metrics and models using data of many kinds. And with that, I will hand the presentation over to Jerry.
Thank you, Christy, and welcome to our webinar today on the fundamentals of volumetric forecasting. The term volumetric comes from forecasting new product sales volumes. Hence, the term volumetric has become commonly used to describe the type of forecasting that we're talking about today for new products. What's interesting is that volumetric forecasting and the concepts that underlie volumetric forecasting, while used primarily for new product sales forecasting, are also extremely valuable in forecasting the volumetric and economic implications of a range of marketing decisions, such as price changes or line extension or changes in distribution. So it's a very powerful set of tools that are used broadly beyond just forecasting. This is the second of three presentations on volumetric forecasting. The first was on CPG, or consumer packaged goods, fast-moving consumer goods in Europe. But today's presentation is on durable goods, and those are products defined by the U.S. government as products lasting 3 years or longer, such as refrigerators, washing machines, cars, tractors, machines, bulldozers, a whole range of products. We are planning a third presentation on volumetric forecasting later this year on new services. And of course, services are intangibles. There's not, you can't buy them, you have to subscribe to them on a longer term basis. But today the focus is durable goods. A few definitions before we get into it. When we talk about volumetric forecasting, we're talking about actual sales to the end user. And often the term depletions is used as a description of that narrow definition of sales. Some companies count a new product as a sale when it's shipped from the factory or when it goes into inventory, but all of that is excluded from our volumetric forecasting. So we're trying to forecast the number of cars that are going to be driven off of the dealer's lot, or the number of washing machines that are going to be installed in homes, the end users. So all of the production that's in transit and work in progress and inventory is excluded from the sales forecast. Typically, forecasts are made in terms of retail pricing. So to get back to a manufacturer's sales forecast, the forecast that we provide has to be discounted by the profit margin of that particular category or industry. So we're trying to forecast sale in terms of retail pricing. There's a term called the diffusion curve, and it's pictured here, and it's often confused with or used interchangeably with the adoption curve. But the diffusion curve originally and historically referred to what this chart that you see, and everyone has seen this chart if you've ever opened a marketing textbook or an economics textbook or a new products textbook. And this chart begins with 2.5% innovators at the left tail of the distribution, and then goes to early adopters, and then with laggards over on the right. Strangely enough, all of these percentages add up to 100%. It's not quite sure 100% of what, since no product is ever used by 100% of the population, or it's extremely rare. But this diffusion curve goes back to work by a university professor in the 1940s involving the adoption of new seed corn in the Midwest. So it's just quite accidental, I'm sure, that the results happen to perfectly fit a bell-shaped curve that a professor might be familiar with. So this is interesting, but it's pure fiction. And even if it were true at the time it was conceived, it's only true for seed corn in the 1940s in the Midwest. So don't bother with this curve. The last definition is the adoption curve. And this is typically what an adoption curve looks like, and it's defined as the cumulative percentage of total households that will adopt the new product over time. And most of the adoption curves you see in textbooks go from 0 to 100%, and I'm not sure why that's done that way, because in the real world adoption curves never reach 100%. But this is the general shape and slope of an adoption curve. Volumetric forecasting begins with a new product concept. This is a core, the basic idea of a new product. And it can be presented in many ways in the form of a print ad, a concept board, a TV storyboard, a television commercial. It can be a 90-second video or a 2-minute video, or it can be done in a product clinic. And I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. But typically the new product concept, however it's presented, presents main selling points or benefits of the new product. There's some type of demonstration of how this product works and how to use it, and there's some type of pricing information. And this is especially important for durable goods because very often some of these products can be quite expensive. The secret to forecasting is good concept testing results or accurate concept testing results. And the secret to accurate concept testing results is having ironclad concept standards that govern how new products are going to be described and presented to potential buyers in a research study. And those concept standards are essential so that you're building up reactions to different products and different product concepts, not building up reactions to different types of presentation or different types of concepts. So concept standards are really, really important. And this is something that should be a part of every company's new product development and testing standards. The concept test typically can run anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes in length, depending on the product category and the number of issues that are in play. But almost always purchase intent or purchase interest will be measured, and the questions that we ask to get at this are different depending on the product category. If it's a $25 power drill, we might ask a standard 5-point purchase intent question that we use in the CPG world. Or if it's a $75,000 SUV, we would use a completely different set of questions, and it may revolve around searching for more information on the web, likelihood to visit a dealer and go for a test drive. Be softer kinds of questions where we could build up a probability of purchase from a set of questions. Typically for durable goods, we're also including questions about an expected purchase time horizon. If you like this new product idea, are you likely to buy it right now, or in 6 months, or in 3 years? Because that helps give us a sense of the slope of that adoption curve that we talked about earlier. We always include questions about product uniqueness, because this is an implicit measure of competition for a new product. If consumers perceive this new product as totally unique, that means it doesn't have much direct competition, and that's a positive factor. Pricing is always included, as I mentioned, especially if the price is significant. A question is usually included about what product would this new product replace or substitute for. And this provides some good information on what this product is directly and indirectly competing with, and it provides good qualitative information that might cause us to modify a forecast based on this perceived competition. Another subject area that's covered for durable goods, not so much for CPG, is would the potential buyer recommend this product to others or talk about this product to other people? Because one of the factors that influences the shape and the slope of that adoption curve is how much people talk about a product and how much they interact relative to that product. So this is another important subject area for durable goods. Concept test samples can vary widely depending on the product category, what you're trying to achieve. We like to limit the sample to people who say they're likely to buy this product category in the next 2 or 3 years, if there is a well-defined category. If there is no well-defined category, then we have to go with a very large sample. Always be sure not to exclude groups from, that is, don't make the presumption that you can exclude people from the sample because they already own this type of product or because they're not in the market for this type of product. For example, we are aware that some automotive manufacturers, U.S. automotive manufacturers, exclude people who are likely to buy a Japanese car and exclude people who are likely to buy a German car from their research studies. Well, this is short-sighted at best and biasing also. So be very careful about who you exclude from the concept testing and who you exclude from the sampling. So in general, you want to use as broad a sample as you can within the category. And then the sample size should be scaled to the size of the market opportunity. So if it's a power drill with a market potential of $20 million, maybe a sample size of 200 or 300 target consumers is adequate. But if it's a new car that has a market potential of $1 billion, maybe you want to go up to 500 or 1,000 people who are likely to buy a car in that price range in the next 2 or 3 years. And then if it's a totally new product category, that is, it's a radically new product that no one has ever seen before, then you may have to go up to a sample size of 1,500 or even 2,000 to have a base of enough people who are really interested in the product concept that you can make accurate volumetric forecast. So I mentioned the concept test is the fundamental step in the new product development process. And generally you're doing concept testing or concept screening at a very early stage in the life of a new durable good. This is the starting point. That initial concept test or concept screening identifies product ideas that have enough potential to go through the development process. And some of the things that you learn at those starting concept tests are ideas and feedback that helps guide the development of the new product as it's being worked on. The new product concept test for the basis of volumetric forecasting, however, generally takes place late in the development process when the product concept is fully developed, perhaps working prototypes or even finished products are available. Now we have a much more accurate stimulus to get reactions to provide a more accurate basis for volumetric forecasting. And of course what we're trying to forecast is the adoption curve that I described earlier. And concept testing and the feedback that we get from that concept testing is key to forecasting the adoption curve. We recommend and conduct a lot of product clinics for different types of durable goods. And for many of these products, the clinic is actually the best way to communicate the concept test or to conduct the concept test. Many durable goods products are very complicated, and you have to understand kind of how it works and what the different components are and how they interact. So they're more complicated than many of the CPG products, and that's why we very often use a product clinic as the way to do that final concept test. And it's commonly done, for example, in the automotive industry, and you set up a showroom and target audience consumers are brought in. They may look at the product first in isolation, and then the new car is shown next to its competitors, and consumers go through a series of questions and ratings and to get their reactions to the product in the clinic. And in a way, the product clinic you can think of as a partial product test. It's not a complete product test because, but I describe it as partial because in that product clinic, the consumer can, smell the product, they can feel the product, they can touch the product, they can put their hands on the steering wheel or the controls, they can push buttons. So it is a partial test of the product and the way it operates and the way people interact with it. So the product clinic is a very important step. If the product lends itself to an actual usage test, or what we're calling a product test, we always recommend this step. And ideally we want to test this new product in the home or in the environment where the product will be used. So if it's a power drill, for example, we might be able to set up a central location product test where people come in and we let them drill holes in boards and maybe a piece of metal, and let them interact with the drill and try to change a drill bit and so forth. But if it's possible, if budgets and time permit, we always recommend an actual product test. And this would be an in-home or on-the-job testing of the product, whatever the relevant testing environment is. And people would use it for a month or 2 months or 3 months. In the case of a washing machine, for example, it might be installed in 50 or 100 homes for 3 months, 6 months, maybe even a year, so they can be tested under battle conditions. The product test is highly predictive of how well a product will do when it's introduced into the marketplace. And generally, the higher the test scores in a usage test, the more likely that product is to succeed in the marketplace. There are a number of sales forecasting techniques for durable goods. We will not cover all of them today, but we'll talk briefly about the most important methods that are in common usage. Guesstimation is the most commonly used method of forecasting new product sales. It involves dartboards and magic and seat of the pants and pulling numbers from thin air. And this is, again, probably 99% of all new products go to market based on somebody's guess. It is the fastest way to market, true, but it is also the most expensive, and in many ways ends up being the most time-consuming because of failure. So guesstimation is widely used but is not recommended. History, and we're not saying that you can base a volumetric forecast on history, but an individual company's history of new product success and failure is an important piece of information that we need for volumetric forecasting. And the kinds of things that we want to understand about this specific company is how quickly can this company build distribution? What's the shape of that distribution curve typically? And how quickly can this company build total brand awareness? And what's the shape of that brand awareness curve? What does it look like? Is this company willing to invest in consistent media advertising, and for how long? That adoption curve can be bent upward or downward based on the quality and the quantity of media advertising investment. And different companies have different abilities to get presence at retail if we're talking about a retail product. So can you get your product on at eye level on the shelf, or are you stashed away on the bottom shelf where no one can find you? And can you get 3 facings at retail, or can you get a whole section devoted to your new product? So companies have different strengths and different abilities in terms of introducing new products. And we really need to understand that before we can make a volumetric forecast. And this brings us to a really important point, and that is that every volumetric forecast must be calibrated to an individual company's capabilities. There's no one size fits all here. Because, if a new product is being introduced by Ford Motor Company and they've got massive distribution system, think about a little startup automotive company that has limited number of dealers and limited distribution and relatively limited experience in advertising new products. There's no comparison to how successful those two companies would be with the same product. Qualitative research is not commonly thought of as a forecasting technique, and it's not a primary forecasting technique, but we view qualitative research as a really important complement to the whole volumetric forecasting process. So we like to see qualitative research used in the very early stages of concept evaluation, and it can be used at later stages to better understand potential buyers, interaction with the product and other products in the category. So qualitative research helps provide understanding at key points in the forecasting process that can end up increasing or improving the accuracy of the final forecast. And you know, you can't learn everything by observation or by survey research methods. There are some issues and problems that would be undetected by these other research methods that would be quickly revealed by qualitative research. So we really like to see qualitative research included. It helps identify questions and variables that we need to address during the forecasting process. If you go back 50 or 60 years, and this probably is beyond the time horizon for most of the listeners, participants today, viewers, but most new products were evaluated via test markets, and companies would go into 2 or 3 smaller markets like Lubbock, Texas, or somewhere out in the middle of the Midwest or the Ohio River Valley. They'd find a small city. They would introduce their product into stores in that city. They would monitor it for a year or 2, and then if it proved successful, they would then roll that product out nationwide. But this was a very, very expensive and time-consuming process, and there was a huge danger that your major competitors would come in and read your test market and actually beat you to market with the product. So this gave rise to what is called simulated test markets, or STMs, and simulated test markets try to emulate or simulate the kinds of processes that go on in real markets, so that we can forecast sales much more quickly. So those inputs to the simulated test market are concept testing results, product clinic and or product test results, choice modeling results, and we always recommend including choice modeling as a component in the concept testing for volumetric forecasting. And then of course marketing inputs. What kind of distribution is going to be achieved? How many gross rating points are going to be spent, invested in advertising? And there are a number of other marketing inputs depending on the product category. So all of these results or inputs are fed into Conceptor volumetric forecasting models. And this allows us, based on that, to predict year 1 sales and year 2 new product sales, or depletions, as we were described earlier. It's possible to predict for longer time horizons, but of course the further out into the future you attempt to predict, the less accurate the forecast becomes. Simulated test markets may be controversial at times because of validation issues, and I think that's fair. I think that's a legitimate concern and question. There are many validation studies that have been done by companies that do volumetric forecasting, but I'm not sure we can fully trust any of those validation studies because there's no independent verification or auditing of this process. So we all perhaps should be a little bit suspicious about the claims. A bigger issue in our mind, however, is that validation tends to be one-sided. It's all based on false positives. That is, it's only the products that get positive test results that end up being introduced into the market. And then we can say, oh, well, 10% of those products failed, so we had a 90% success rate. What we don't know is the 90% of new product concepts that never go to market. What percentage of those products, had they been fully supported by advertising and left in the market for a while, what percentage of those that we predicted would be failures would actually be great successes? And that happens all the time. So this is the great unknown. So what this tends to mean is that we really don't know how many false negatives occur. We have a rough idea of false positives, but no idea of false negatives. So the error rates that are cited for all simulated test markets are probably understated, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. I'd like to hand this off to John and have him talk to us a little bit about choice modeling. And as I mentioned, we would do a concept test, and then once that's finished, we would append the choice model to the concept test. John?
Okay, thank you, Jerry. The choice modeling enables us to take the new product and to put it into a competitive context. And in put it into a context where we provide greater detail about alternative brands available to the new product, to the new product's brand features and pricing, and even warranties or promotions. Typically, the consumer sees 8 to 10 scenarios in a survey setting, and each scenario shows the new product compared to the competitive products. And across scenarios for the same survey respondent, an experimental design is used to vary product features, pricing, add-ons, promotions, or warranties. And this enables us in the back end, in our final forecasting model, to look at hundreds of marketing possibilities and really producing many, many alternative forecasts. And the output of this, of course, can be market share. It can be unit sales. It's actually linked to the concept test results so that in the end, they're providing one and the same answer, but we're able to simulate many alternative forecasts if we include the choice modeling component.
John, do you typically have to discount or adjust those results, those market share results?
Yes, we do. And the choice modeling is really great at having the consumer think about all the different elements in a decision process, which does give a more accurate decision, but there's still overstatement in the survey setting. And that overstatement in a choice modeling context needs to be adjusted and calibrated. This is an example of a choice task that might be shown to consumers in an automotive category. And we see here that we have two vehicles, vehicle A and B, and they vary in terms of the interior features, the engine, the drive type, safety features, sound system, and as well as price itself. And the survey respondent will see a series of these type scenarios, each one being a little different, and then they would make a choice about which product they're most likely to buy and how likely they are to buy it. This provides us, the effort here is to try to simulate what happens in the real market. So we want to include those elements that are most important in the decision process. Another type of approach we can use in volumetric forecasting is to include agent-based modeling. Now, agent-based models are something that has developed over the past few years to decades, and they represent competitive markets. Agents in this case are consumers or buyers, but also sellers are agents. And the agents themselves are limited, are given certain rules of behavior that they can operate in the market, and they can also have learning that goes on. So artificial intelligence, machine learning can simulate learning by consumers as they use new products and appreciate the quality of those products. The agents are autonomous, so every buyer can decide what he or she wants to do, interact with other agents. This could be through social media, through blogs, it could be in person. They interact with their environment. It could be that they interact with driving by and seeing a billboard, and we can program in what's the probability of that event happening. And they can respond to other advertising, any kind of advertising and stimuli, whether that be digital advertising and whether it be on television or more traditional media. They can learn and adapt as they interact with other agents in this system. And the idea of this is to build an environment where agents interact with each other with certain probabilities, and then to set the system running to determine what the possible outcomes could be in terms of forecasting. And here's a simple example of a case where we have these consumers or agents who are out there in the marketplace, and then they move around and interact with one another and have a probability of interaction. Through this kind of word of mouth or other kind of social interaction, they eventually learn about the product, and the red persons here are the ones who actually adopt it. And we can see that we can trace out an adoption curve, and this is one outcome. In an agent-based model, we can vary the inputs about learning behavior and about the probabilities of interacting, which is affected by the type of media used and the type of technology that becomes available so rapidly these days to determine what the adoption curve might look like.
So you might run many, many different experiments with different variables to see how that would affect your forecast?
That's exactly right. And we can see how it affects the shape of the adoption curve as well.
When most of the forecast, the modeling leads us to an estimate of market share, if it's an established market. If it's not an established market, then we're trying to predict the market size. But typically the models will help us derive a market share estimate for year 1 and year 2, and then of course, so we need information on the size of the market. And typically clients are very knowledgeable about their business and their industries and have data sources that can provide that market size information. But there are also secondary data sources that we can go to for market size information. And there are also good governmental sources, data sources, some of the like the Consumer Expenditure Survey and other government surveys that are done to extremely high levels of quality and accuracy can be used for market sizing information. And even the concept test and the surveys that we're doing as a part of the forecasting process also give us cross checks on the size of the market. So once we bring that market sizing data into our Conceptor forecasting models combined with the other inputs that we've talked about today, that yields the final forecast. And then one of the reasons we recommend the inclusion of choice modeling is so we can build a forecasting simulator. What are some of the advantages, John, of having a forecasting simulator?
Well, the simulator, first of all, enables the manager to quickly provide alternative forecasts as the market adjusts and as things happen in the marketplace that might be unexpected. One can go and use the simulator and provide an alternative forecast relatively quickly. It also enables us to do what-if scenarios. So what if this happens in the marketplace, or what if the price were higher? What would that imply about the first year sales and the second year sales? So these kind of what-if games, this interactive feature, ability to interact with your forecasting process and provide alternative outcomes, is enhanced through the simulator.
One of the things that I personally like about a forecasting simulator is the power to react to competitive action. So if you have a good forecasting simulator, let's suppose your new product has been introduced into the market, and several months later a competitor runs a deep discount promotion to try to block the introduction of your product. You can then take the simulator, plug in those discounted prices for your competitor to see how it's going to affect your adoption curve and your market share. And then you can play with different ways that you might respond to that competitive attack or that competitive threat. So the simulator not only helps us improve the forecast, it helps our clients improve their reaction to changing conditions in the marketplace once that new product is introduced. Forecasting accuracy, again, this is based on the false positives. There are products that where the testing indicates they're not going to be successful, but in fact they would have been successful, so that's always a risk. But forecasting accuracy, if we only do a concept test, the forecasting accuracy is plus or minus 25 to 30%. So a pretty big error range. If we do a concept test, say, plus a product clinic where the target consumers or end users have a much better understanding of exactly what the product is, so that means their reactions to it are more accurate or more precise. That error range drops down to the 15 to 20% range. If we can combine a concept test with the product clinic and product testing, where we know exactly how happy people are with the product after extended usage, that error range drops down to plus or minus 10 to 15% range. And then if we can combine all of that and add in the choice modeling, that allows us to improve the forecast even more down into the 5 to 10% range, plus or minus. So these are based on many these error ranges. I'm trying to estimate it for our whole industry, a whole forecasting industry here. But I think these are fair. These error ranges are larger than many companies claim, but I think these are a fair assessment of the state of accuracy of volumetric forecasting based on the kinds of research that we've talked about today. Simulated test markets and volumetric forecasting can help get new products to market faster. It can reduce the cost, reduce costly errors. So it's something that companies really should seriously consider. The one area that I would caution everyone to be wary is that if you have a radically new product or a radically different idea that tests poorly, we would recommend, you may want to put it in test market. You may want to place it in people's homes and let them use it for 6 months or a year, because sometimes these radically new products that people are not familiar with and don't have experience with will tend to get low scores when we go out to try to test it. But once it goes to market, it may be slow to take off, but it'll go on and become a great success. So if something is really different, really unique, we just need to be very careful and cautious and don't kill those products too quickly. John, I think as we were going along, I think some questions came in. I'm just wondering, what you mentioned you were talking about agent-based modeling. What types of products or categories would best fit the use of agent-based modeling?
Right. So products where consumers interact with one another a lot in order to make purchase decisions is a prime candidate for that kind of agent-based modeling. And also situations where the environment or the market situation is uncertain and can change dramatically or is changing dramatically, because are on the cusp of changing dramatically. Those kinds of environmental conditions can be programmed into agent-based models to see what alternative outcomes, alternative futures could look like.
Mm-hmm. And another question that came in, and I can take a swing at this, is why do you recommend choice modeling as a part of the forecasting process? And it's true that we could base the forecast purely on the concept test, the product clinic, and the product test. But the inclusion of choice modeling gives us a lot more information about how people are making decisions, what they're trading off against one another, and it helps us better understand how they're going to respond to this product in the marketplace, especially when pricing is changing, when promotions are changing, or distribution levels might be changing. So choice modeling, helps improve the accuracy of the forecast, but as I mentioned earlier, it also gives us a tool to help us respond to competitive threats and competitive attacks while that product is being introduced into the market. What are your thoughts, John? And other questions come in about the BAS decision model. Is that something that you typically use in your forecasting?
The BAS diffusion model has a long history in academia. It really is not part of our forecasting. The BAS diffusion model is developed for some durable goods in the past, and it's a very broad-based type of model that gives very, very average kind of crude results. So we really don't find it that useful in our forecasting process where we're looking at particular new products.
Okay.
We had another easier question here about what do you mean by the forecasting horizon, Jerry?
The forecasting horizon is how far out into the future are we trying to predict new product sales. And we can predict pretty accurately for 1 to 2 years out into the future. So the forecasting horizon would be 2 years in that case. Well, once you go beyond that 2-year mark, that's, new products can come to market, markets can change, so the further out into the future we go, the less accurate the volumetric forecast comes. There was another question that came in here that I would like to answer, and that is that the question is, some in our company are advocating the use of agile marketing in place of marketing research and forecasting to help us with new products. So agile marketing, that is that we should be, doing a lot of quick experiments and throwing things against the wall to see if they stick, is a surefire way to kill all new product ideas and embarrass yourself in the marketplace. Agile marketing is a bad idea, a bad concept, and a complete failure as a way to try to manage new product development and introduction. Because the biggest problem with new products is that if you're introducing 20 new products, that means you're not putting any money or support behind any of them. And out of those 20 new products that you could throw into the marketplace, you've wasted all that time and all that effort developing those products. It just doesn't, it's crazy. It doesn't make any sense. Much better to test those ideas, see which of those 20 products have a real chance of success, and then support those products with a lot of investment and advertising and sales force effort. Then you have a good chance of having a successful new product. But if you just stick 20 new products on the market, they're all going to fail. It's a complete waste of time. Well, thank you all very much for attending today's webinar, and thanks for the questions. We're going to turn it back over to Christy now, and thanks so much.
Well, thank you, Jerry and John, and thank you, everyone, for attending today's Insider Series webinar. If you have any questions or would like a copy of the webinar deck, please feel free to email either Jerry or John. Our next Insider Series webinar will be Wednesday, April 12th. Decision analysts Clay Detloff and Elizabeth Horn will be presenting on consumer market segmentation and profiling, painting a portrait of success. We hope you enjoyed today's session and are looking forward to seeing you for next month's webinar. And have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you very much.